They say the mountain measures you before you ever set foot on it. Nora Whitaker repeated that line as the gravel road thinned and spruce closed behind the Subaru like a zipper. She and Elias Ross had left Pittsburgh before dawn with coffee in jars and a rental receipt for a fire watch cabin somewhere high in West Virginia's Monongahela National Forest. He called it a reset. She called it an argument postponed by trees. A slumped gate crossed the track, once red, now the color of dried blood. Across its bar ran straight gouges, parallel and oddly calm, too high for boots, too measured for a bear's lazy swipe. "Storm," Elias said. "Storm with a ruler," Nora answered. The first triangle appeared 2 bends later. 3 clean cuts on a beach, the point aimed downslope into rhododendron. A second triangle pointed upslope. A third stared straight down the road. By the time the trees thinned and the cabin hunched into view, she had counted 7 and stopped telling herself they were trailblazes. The cabin squatted on a stone foundation. Inside smelled like iron and mouse. A table made from a door anchored the room. A heater the size of a coffin sulked in the corner. They opened windows and set a simple perimeter because it felt like choosing to live. Elias strung monofilament across the porch steps and clipped on a cowbell. "Bears," he said. "Everything else," Nora said. They ate with jackets on. The first knock came after midnight. 3 patient taps on the outer wall. Each measured the same. "Tree," Elias decided. "Wind," Nora offered, though there was none. The knocks migrated to the window above Nora's bunk. The glass exhaled cloud and cleared. She lifted the shade and found only her face floated in a square of black. The bell never rang. At dawn, the porch held a perfect triangle of twigs, its point aimed at the door. The monofilament hung in 2 neat tails, cut clean, not frayed. Mud around the steps kept no footprints. "Kids?" Elias dried. "In February?" Nora asked. They followed the carved triangles because daylight makes liars of caution. The marks led along a firebreak into a laurel hell that forced them to stoop. Sap glittered on fresh cuts. In a small clearing, a bell hung from an ash on a leather thong, jammed with twigs to keep it from ringing. Elias reached. Nora caught his wrist. "Please don't," she said, which he didn't, which frightened her more. Back at the cabin, Nora's broom lifted a loose floorboard. Beneath lay a notebook wrapped in oilcloth and tied with bright copper wire. The first entries were tidy weather notes from the 1940s. Then the writing leaned and stumbled. Dates slipped. The content turned to instructions arranged like prayers. "If you see 3 marks together, do not answer to your name. Do not whistle after noon. Leave before the light goes thin. If the bell is cut, do not speak to it." "What does that mean?" Elias asked. "That we should go," Nora said. They packed with the carefulness of people trying not to make noise inside a thought. As they stepped off the porch, the triangle had been rebuilt larger, the point still aimed at the door. Halfway to the car, the forest rearranged by degrees. A trunk stood where no trunk had been. A trail broke left where it had run straight. Through birch trunks, Nora saw figures, tall, thin, jointed where bodies shouldn't hinge. They didn't walk. They arrived, each blink erasing distance. Elias squeezed her hand. "Don't run," he whispered, as if repeating a rule that owned him. The nearest figure had a face like a suggestion, hollows where features might be. Its chest rose and fell like language without sound. Between two trees hung a tiny triangle of braided vine, offered at child hand height. They stepped backward along their own prints. The figures did not chase. They adjusted the world until every direction felt wrong. Elias said Nora, and the second syllable stretched too long, pulled thin until it snapped. She turned and found absence. No cry, no struggle, just the shape of where he should have been. Her body ran before she chose to run. She slid down needles, palms tasting dirt. She did not scream. Screaming felt like stepping into a triangle drawn in air. Branches caught in her jacket and let go with small sounds. She ran until her knees forgot their chore, and her lungs made little bells under her ribs. A ranger found her at dusk, a tall man who approached as if fear were a skittish animal. "How?" he said, offering his name and a jacket without touch. He didn't question much on the way out. He paved the trail with instructions. Route there, slick patch, step small. At the station, a squat building with a humming soda machine, he brewed tea and let her say what she could. "You're not the first to meet the mountain sideways," he said, and phoned 2 volunteers. They went up at first light and came down before noon with soot on their cuffs. "The cabin's gone," he told her, "burned from the inside out, no spread to the trees." He slid a length of bright copper wire onto the table, near where a floorboard used to be. "Yours?" Nora nodded because a scent felt like a handhold. Back in Pittsburgh, noise acted like medicine. The bus brakes, the elevator's clank, the city's little bells didn't hurt. She waited for a call that did not come. At 3:07 one morning, 3 patient taps visited her bedroom wall. She dressed the sound in explanations, pipes, neighbor, settling, and none of them fit. A padded envelope arrived with no return address. Inside lay the journal with new oilcloth. The list waited. At the bottom of that page, in a cramped edition, someone had written, "If one of you is taken, the other is measured." She didn't know how to be a number. On Sunday, she drove back. Noon found her at the ridge where the cabin had crouched. The earth held its outline in ash like a chalk drawing. 3 charred triangles nested in the center, delicate as lace burned and left whole. She set the journal at the edge and opened to a blank page. Wind combed the spruce like rain in another language. Far off, a bell rang once. Another answered closer and higher. She wrote, "I'm leaving now." We leave before the light goes thin. She walked out the way she'd come in. The figures didn't show themselves. The triangles looked older by an hour. The leather thong on the ash held nothing. At the gate, the parallel scratches lined up with a pair of human hands. She passed through and did not touch the metal. Back home, the knocks did not return. The journal sat on her table, though she hadn't picked it up. She placed it in the oven. The oilcloth gave. The book blackened without curling. The pages stood like a sculpture of ash. She left it until morning, the way you leave a place set for a guest who has declined. Weeks found a kind of order. Bells hid in ordinary noises. Triangles appeared in traffic signs and window shadows. She kept Elias's name where names go when they
aren't for speaking. She learned daylight better than clocks. Hal called once. "You all right?" he asked. "I'm not wrong," she said. He didn't tell her his men had heard a bell on a windless morning. She didn't tell him she kept a bag by the door, shoes pointing out, gas tank above half. Agreement isn't surrender, it's measurement. They say the mountain measures you before you ever set foot on it. Nora believes it. She also believes some places don't want a story. They want a shape kept quietly inside the body, of leaving, of not whistling, of names not spoken after noon. If you ask what happened, she'll tell you the weather. If you ask about Elias, she'll say he broke the noon rule, and you'll nod as if you understand. On certain mornings, she waits by the window and watches light climb the opposite brick. At 11:57, she pours water between mugs so it will sound like a creak and not a bell. At 12 o'clock, she opens the glass and lets air braid the curtain. She doesn't know what number the mountain assigned her. She only knows she leaves before the light goes thin and never answers to her name if 3 marks stand together. If the forest ever wants to renegotiate, it knows where to knock. And if you hear 3 patient taps on your wall on a windless night, consider what shape your silence takes and whether you know the rule about noon. Remember this much: triangles point both ways, bells are mouths, and the mountain keeps score. Leave at noon, speak softly, and never offer your name to the trees again.